So in the next session, you're going to hear from Sarah Outcalt, and she's going to talk about some of the work related to surveys and stakeholder engagement and usability. And she is the Market Transformation Research Director at UC Davis. So thanks, Sarah, for joining.
Great. So this morning, I have the opportunity to present some highlights from research conducted by my team of social and behavioral scientists at UC Davis, including my colleagues Angela Sanguinetti and Eli Austin-Stepnitz, among others. The two that I just mentioned are online to answer questions if anybody has some clarifying questions in real time. Next slide, please. Thanks. As you're all aware, technology, policy, and customers are critical elements of the load flexibility landscape. They're interconnected in ways such that each has impacts for the other. So our work for CalFlexHub has explored stakeholder perspectives on each of these domains and their interactions. Next slide. We engaged in 4 distinct research efforts to understand the load flexibility landscape. We interviewed nearly 100 stakeholders from different groups to understand their priorities, needs, and constraints related to load flexibility. We surveyed 1,000 California households to explore the trade-offs they'd be willing to make between cost, comfort, and convenience. We conducted interviews and surveys with users involved in 10 different field tests that you'll hear about later today. And we conducted market assessments of 6 load flex devices and controls. Today, I'll highlight some of the key findings from across these 4 research efforts as they pertain to the load flexibility landscape. Next slide, please. So at the 30,000-foot level, we wanted to understand what was stakeholders' general take on California's vision for load flexibility and dynamic prices. And in general, they said it was the right direction. It was critical. They also described it as ambitious, lofty, or bold. And they anticipated that implementation could be messy and painful. They noted the challenges exist on the technical side with respect to access to electrical infrastructure and load flexible devices. But most importantly, they acknowledged that it's the policymaking that will be the most difficult part. They note the need for harmonization between load flexibility policy and other energy policies in the state. And as Siva talked about, the need for those policymaking bodies themselves to coordinate. Next slide. In contrast, stakeholders are fairly optimistic about the technical side of the load flexibility landscape. They're largely confident that the capability exists to develop the types of devices that we need. But they note the chicken and egg problem, whereby technology providers are hesitant to invest in load flex products if robust demand signals for market signals don't exist. And it's difficult to establish the types of policy mechanisms that would encourage those signals without a robust roster of commercially available technologies. Some OEMs we talked to said that in the face of this uncertainty, they're taking a wait and see approach. Others are going more aggressive, hedging their bets, but doing so at significant financial risk. So we need continued public investment to encourage R&D in this space to make sure that plenty of devices are available. Next slide. Moving now to the customer side of the landscape. We wanted to get a sense of the general perspective on voluntary enrollment in dynamic prices. And it's important to consider the counterfactual here. Many stakeholders we talked to said, wow, that's going to be challenging to get broad participation. Really, the only way to achieve it is to default customers in. Well, that's not on the table, and they recognize that there's significant political challenges to that. But it's worth considering what alternatives there are. So thinking about the voluntary approach, we asked stakeholders what they thought customers' willingness and ability would be to participate in load flexibility. Next slide. Stakeholders are generally confident that commercial customers have the technical sophistication and the devices in place to provide load flexibility. However, they noted that customers are not going to be willing to sacrifice their core operations or occupant comfort in exchange for reducing their energy costs or emissions. So while they may have the ability, they may have limited willingness to participate. Stakeholders largely felt that the reverse was true in the case of residential customers, that in that case, they would be interested in participating in load flexibility, particularly as a way to reduce their energy bills. However, they might face barriers to doing so in terms of access to those load flexible technologies and perhaps concerns about loss of autonomy and privacy. These perspectives were largely validated by the customer survey that we did in the residential space. Next slide. To understand whether residential customers can be enticed to participate voluntarily in load flexible programs, we ran a statewide survey of more than 1,000 California households, which included a choice-based conjoint experiment. We found that over 80% of respondents said they'd be willing to participate with their heating, cooling, and/or water heating. And when we asked them to evaluate specific trade-offs between bill savings and levels of load flexibility, we found about half of them were interested in the highest bill savings possible. So they were willing to give quite a bit of flexibility. Another group, more or less half, was interested in a more moderate balance between savings and load flex. So we see a lot of variation there. Any programs that would be developed would need to take account of that. And we're seeing in some other research that we're doing that there are programs emerging allowing customers to participate at different tiered levels, say 2, 4, or 6 degree setbacks. Now, while financial benefit is vital for virtually everyone we talk to, a small minority of respondents also reported being motivated by the potential to reduce their environmental impact or help support grid reliance. It's important to note that most of our respondents also reported some concerns with respect to automated load flexibility. They talked about the concern related to bill increases, having their AC scaled back to the extent that they became uncomfortably warm, and the potential for the sense of loss of control or privacy. Next slide. Now, from customer appetite, we turn to the terms of engagement. That is the extent to which customers or users need to be kept in the loop. Our research reveals some limitations and drawbacks to attempting to bypass users altogether. Interviews we conducted in collaboration with the field tests that you'll hear more about later today suggest that in general, users noticed and were impacted by load flexibility events, albeit in different ways by different end uses. Their comfort was impacted by thermostat setbacks. But even in more subtle end use cases like water heating, while their service might not have been interrupted, they often had other cues to clue them into the fact that a load flexibility event was happening. This included things like noise generated from the equipment itself. And when this happened at inconvenient or unexpected times, customers or users found this to be disruptive and sometimes confusing. We also found that some equipment operators reported psychological stress from feeling like they had insufficient information about or control over the equipment under their purview. So our findings suggest that invisible load flexibility may not be entirely feasible. We're not suggesting that we don't automate at all, but rather that you keep humans in the loop in some meaningful way. And in fact, doing so can be beneficial. We find that a little bit of engagement, and in some cases a lot, can lead to better outcomes. Next slide. User engagement can involve several forms. Our research suggests that at a minimum, users need to be able to retain ultimate control, right? They need to have the option for an override button or an override option. This is important for maintaining control, but also mitigating real and perceived risks. Our research also suggests that it may be beneficial for users to have the option to set the terms of their engagement with load flexibility. So the duration, intensity, frequency, or timing of the load flex events that they participate in. Again, this echoes the findings of our survey, that people are interested at different levels. And frankly, we need flexibility from everybody in whatever level they're willing to participate in. Users across all field tests wanted to know about the potential for the financial impact or environmental impact that their participation had. This suggests that having some mechanism for feedback could help encourage continued engagement. Next slide. As I've mentioned several times, Customer interest in load flexibility largely stems from the potential to save money on their energy bills, and this comes down to rate design. Stakeholders are keenly aware of the inherent conundrums in rate design. They note that there's a tension between creating high differentials, such that there's a strong signal to incentivize participation, while at the same time, it's important not to inadvertently penalize those who cannot or choose not to participate. Stakeholders emphasize that those who can't participate may be barred from doing so because they don't have flexibility capital, which is the ability to shift when they use energy in their buildings or homes. And this can happen for a variety of reasons. Many customers don't have access to load flexibility devices, and many simply don't have the ability to absorb potential bill spikes. So there's a delicate balance that needs to be struck here. And that conversation happening between various policymakers and entities in the room, as Siva talked about, is really critical in figuring out how to navigate this. Next slide. So as we consider what we've learned from stakeholders about policy, technology, and customers, it's clear that several elements need to align, and this requires some strategic sequencing. We need clear signals about the market opportunities and incentives to encourage load-flexible device development. To ensure those devices deliver on their technical potential, we need careful controls development, seamless installation and integration, and skilled workforce. We need dynamic rates that are carefully designed to deliver broad opportunities, balancing public and private benefits of load flexibility. We need to attract broad participation. This will likely require supporting access to load flex devices, offering significant bill savings, and appealing to social and environmental benefits. These steps will support California's vision for a load-flexible grid in a way that aligns with the broader reliability, affordability, and environmental goals. In short, making the vision a reality may in fact be messy and painful, but tapping into stakeholders' perspectives on the load flexibility landscape can offer insights on the way forward. Thank you.